The Valori Confederation had lived in peace for centuries. Their shining cities floated between the stars, and their culture was filled with music, knowledge, and diplomacy. They were known as artists and thinkers, not warriors, but peace could not last forever. On the outer edge of their territory, a new danger had appeared, the Krylok swarm. These creatures were not builders or dreamers. They were destroyers. They moved like a tide across the galaxy, stripping planets, crushing colonies, and leaving only silence behind. The Valori were terrified. Their ships were fast but fragile. Their soldiers were few and poorly trained. For every Valori vessel, the Krylok could unleash a dozen. For every planet the Valori defended, 3 more were lost. In desperation, the leaders of the Confederation called for help. They sent a great signal into the dark, a message of sorrow and need. It was not a weapon, not a fleet, but a cry. The signal traveled across the stars, carrying a single plea. We need help. Is anyone listening? At first, there was no answer. The Valori feared that none would come. Their allies in nearby systems were too afraid to fight. Other civilizations turned away, pretending not to hear. The Krylok advanced, and the Valori grew weaker. Then at last a voice replied. It was not the voice of a great empire. It was not the voice of a strong ally. It came from a small, strange system that most of the galaxy had long ignored. ShortStories, the Valori leaders, gathered around the transmission in disbelief. They had studied the ancient maps. They knew the name of this place. Sol was not just another world, it was a death world. A death world was a cursed kind of planet. It was a place where nature itself tried to kill every living thing. The gravity was heavy. The storms were violent. The oceans raged with predators. The land crawled with disease and danger. No gentle species could ever rise on such a world. Yet somehow life had not only survived on Sol, it had thrived. The message was short and direct. The strange creatures who called themselves humans had heard the cry for help. And they were coming. The Valori diplomats whispered in fear. Deathworlders. They cannot be trusted. They will be violent, reckless. But others argued, we have no choice. If they can survive Sol, perhaps they can survive the Krylok too. Still, the Valori expected little. They imagined a few crude ships, perhaps filled with desperate scavengers. But when the humans arrived, the galaxy learned something unexpected. The first human fleet was small. Their ships looked patched and rough compared to the smooth silver vessels of the Valori. The hulls bore scars from old battles. The engines burned with a raw, untamed fire. But when the humans spoke, their voices were calm and steady. We heard your call. Show us where you need us. The Valori were cautious. They sent the humans to a ruined colony on the edge of their space. It had once been home to thousands of Valori families. Now it was only ashes. The Krylok had left nothing but broken walls and dark skies. The Valori expected the humans to turn away in despair. Instead, the humans landed and began to work. They walked through the radiation-filled ruins without fear. They built shelters from scraps of metal. They found food where the Valori saw only wasteland. They carried the weak and tended to the injured with simple but effective methods. Where other species would have mourned, the humans rebuilt. The Valori observers were stunned. How can they do this? The air is poisoned. The soil is ruined. But the answer was simple. Humans had come from Sol, a world where nothing was easy, and survival meant adaptation. When the Krylok raiders returned, expecting to find another broken colony, they instead found humans waiting. The battle was small, but it was the first time in years that the Krylok were pushed back. The humans did not fight like the Valori. They used tricks, ambushes, and strange ideas that no other species would dare. They fought with fierce determination, protecting even strangers as if they were family. For the Valori, it was a revelation. They had called for help, and they had expected nothing. But the ones who answered were not like any others. They were born from a death world shaped by danger, tempered by struggle. They were human. As the Krylok ships retreated into the darkness, the Valori watched the humans celebrate, not with pride or arrogance, but with laughter and relief. They had faced impossible odds, and they had survived once again. The Valori leader whispered quietly, as if afraid of the truth in the words, "Perhaps the stories were wrong. Perhaps Deathworlders are not monsters. Perhaps they are what we needed all along." And far above the ruined colony in the starlight of a broken sky, The fleet of Sol prepared to fight again, for when the galaxy had cried for help, it was not the mighty who answered. It was the impossible survivors, it was humanity. Rebuilding among ashes, the colony of Taralis IV had been destroyed almost completely. Whole cities were left in rubble. The air still carried the taste of ash, and the ground was burned black from the Krylok bombardment. To the Valori, the colony was lost. No one could live here again. But the humans saw things differently. Within hours of landing, they started building. They used broken parts of starships to create shelters. They cleaned the air with makeshift filters and boiled water from polluted rivers. One Valori engineer whispered, "They do not see ruins. They see resources." The humans smiled at that remark but kept working. Where the Valori were delicate, the humans were stubborn. Where others saw hopelessness, they saw opportunity. Soon small fires burned for warmth. Food was cooked from strange plants, and wounded survivors were cared for. To the Valori, it was a miracle. The first clash, but the Krylok swarm, was never far away. A week after the humans arrived, a raiding fleet descended again on Taralis IV. The Valori panicked. Their leaders urged retreat, certain the humans could not face such numbers. But the humans did not retreat. Instead, they prepared an ambush. The Krylok were powerful, but they were predictable. They attacked directly with overwhelming force. Humans had studied their movements and found weaknesses. On the day of battle, hidden traps lined the ruins. Mines crafted from scraps, nets of wire, and improvised explosives waited in silence. When the Krylok landed, the ground shook. The Valori trembled in fear. But the humans were ready. Explosions tore through the first wave. Narrow alleys turned into kill zones, where small groups of humans struck and vanished like shadows. They fought with cleverness, not strength. The Valori watched with wide eyes. "They fight like hunters," one whispered. "Not hunters," another corrected softly. "They fight like survivors." The battle raged until the Krylok, frustrated and bleeding, finally withdrew. It was not a great victory in numbers, but it was the first time the swarm had been forced to retreat from Taralis IV, and it had been done by humans. The growing fear among the Valori, opinions divided. Some were inspired, seeing the humans as saviors. Others grew afraid. "Deathworlders are too dangerous," some whispered. "What if they turn against us one day? If they can fight the Krylok, then they can destroy us as well." But the humans gave no sign of conquest. They shared food with Valori survivors. They taught simple defense methods, showing how to use broken tools as weapons. They worked side by side, laughing even as they bled. One young Valori officer asked a human commander, "Why do you help us?" "You owe us nothing." The human only smiled. "Because you asked for help, and because no one deserves to be left alone." The officer did not know what to say. No Valori had ever spoken so simply, so directly. It was not logic, not diplomacy. It was something stronger. Loyalty without condition. Stories of Earth as the rebuilding continued. Humans told stories of their home. They spoke of deserts where the sun burned like fire, of oceans that could swallow fleets, of mountains taller than clouds. They spoke of storms that could shatter cities and creatures with teeth sharper than blades. The Valori listened in awe. To them, Earth sounded like a nightmare, yet humans spoke of it with pride, not fear. "It made us who we are," one human said. "If we can survive Earth, we can survive anything." The Valori began to understand these were not monsters. These were people shaped by hardship, sharpened by challenge. Where other species sought comfort, humans had grown strong by facing danger. The second invasion. The Krylok did not accept their defeat. They returned with greater numbers, determined to erase both Valori and humans. The Valori leaders argued to retreat again, fearing total destruction. But the humans stood firm. "This is not just a colony," a human captain said. "It is a message. If we hold here, others will see that the Krylok can be stopped." So, the humans prepared for war. They built traps in the ruins, dug trenches in the blackened soil, and positioned their ships in risky, hidden orbits. They used every scrap of material, every broken weapon. Nothing was wasted. When the Krylok fleet arrived, they found a world ready for them. The sky filled with fire as human ships darted between larger enemy vessels, using speed and daring to strike at weak points. On the ground, humans fought in small teams, always moving, always adapting. The Valori, inspired by human courage, joined in the defense. They were clumsy at first, unused to war, but the humans taught them quickly. For the first time in living memory, Valori and humans fought side by side. The battle was fierce. The Krylok had numbers, but humans had willpower. They refused to break. Every time a position fell, humans regrouped and struck again. Every time hope seemed lost, they found another way to resist. At last, the Krylok pulled back. Scifi still burned, but it had not fallen. A new understanding. When the smoke cleared, the Valori looked at their strange allies with new eyes. One Valori leader spoke softly. They are not like us. They come from a world that should have destroyed them. Yet instead it gave them strength. Perhaps that is why they fight as they do. Another added, if such a small fleet from Sol can do this, what more can they achieve? The answer was clear. The galaxy had underestimated humans. They were not fragile. They were not reckless. They were something different, something powerful. The Valori had called for help, expecting salvation from an empire. Instead, they found hope in the Deathworlders of Sol. And though the Krylok still loomed, there was a new fire in the hearts of the Valori. For the first time, they believed the swarm could be beaten, because the humans had shown them how. The Krylok swarm was not defeated. Though the battles on Teralis IV had proven that humans could resist them, the swarm remained vast, spreading across star systems like a dark tide. The Valori Confederation still feared the future, for every world saved seemed to cost more lives, and every small victory was followed by the shadow of another attack. But something had changed. The humans had arrived, and with them came a spirit the galaxy had not seen before. Where others despaired, humans pushed forward. Where others surrendered, humans stood tall. The Valori began to believe, and belief was the first step to hope. A gathering of allies. News of the battles on Teralis IV spread quickly. Other civilizations who had once turned their backs on the Valori began to listen. If the Deathworlders of Sol could wound the Krylok, perhaps there was a chance to stop them altogether. Small fleets from neighboring species joined with the humans. At first, their leaders were nervous. They whispered among themselves, "Are these Deathworlders safe? Or will they turn against us too?" But as they fought beside humans, they saw the truth. Humans did not seek conquest. They sought survival for all. They shared supplies freely. They protected strangers as if they were kin, and when battles came, they stood in front, taking the blows that others could not. One elder from the Valori Confederation said quietly, "They do not fight only for themselves. They fight for everyone." The human plan, the Krylok swarm, was vast, but it was not invincible. Humans studied the enemy, searching for weakness. Where others saw an unstoppable tide, humans saw patterns. The Krylok moved in clusters, each led by a massive command ship. If the command ship was destroyed, the rest of the cluster became confused and scattered. The Valori leaders considered such an attack impossible. "The command ships are too heavily guarded," they said. "No fleet has ever broken through," but the humans smiled. "Impossible is just another word for a challenge," their captain replied. Their plan was daring. They would not wait for the Krylok to come. They would strike first, carrying the battle deep into enemy space. The risk was enormous, but the reward was greater. The destruction of a Krylok command ship and proof that the swarm could be broken. Into the dark, the Allied fleet gathered, humans at the lead. Their ships were scarred, patched together with stubborn care, but their crews were determined. The Valori ships followed, elegant but fragile, their hearts filled with new courage. Other allies joined too, small groups from distant systems, each adding what strength they could. Together they crossed the border into Krylok space. The stars grew darker, the silence heavier. Every moment felt like the calm before a storm. When the Krylok finally appeared, they came in overwhelming numbers. Their ships blotted out the stars, surrounding the human-led fleet like hunters circling prey. The Valori trembled. "We cannot face them all," they cried. But the humans were ready. They split their forces, striking not at the swarm itself but at its heart, the great command ship that towered above the rest. The decisive battle. The sky became fire. Human ships darted forward, weaving between larger enemy vessels. They struck engines, blinded sensors, and scattered the swarm's formations. Every move was risky, every strike desperate, but humans thrived in desperation. On the ground below, where the Krylok had built a supply base, human soldiers and Valori fighters landed together. They attacked in small groups, setting traps, cutting fuel lines, and sabotaging defenses. The Krylok were stronger, faster, and more numerous, but they were predictable. Humans were not. One Valori commander, fighting beside human troops, whispered in awe, "They move like chaos itself. The Krylok cannot understand them." In space, the battle reached its peak. The human flagship, battered but unbroken, led the final charge against the command ship. Its crew worked as one, every hand steady, every voice determined. The Krylok fired with all their power, but the humans refused to turn away. With one last desperate strike, the human fleet drove through the defenses. Explosions tore across the command ship's hull, and then with a blinding light it was destroyed. For the first time in history, a Krylok command ship had fallen, the turning tide. The effect was immediate. Without their leader, the swarm ships grew confused, colliding and scattering. Some tried to flee, others attacked blindly. The human fleet, though damaged, pressed the advantage. The Allies joined in, striking with a courage they had never known before. By the end of the battle, the Krylok were in full retreat. The humans had done the impossible. They had proven that the swarm could bleed. Across the galaxy, hope spread like fire. Civilizations that had once hidden now prepared to fight. The Valori, once known only for their music and diplomacy, now stood ready to defend their worlds, because the humans had shown them how. The Deathworlders of Sol after the battle. The Allied leaders gathered to honor the humans. Some were cautious still, uneasy at the thought of Deathworlders among them, but most looked at the humans with respect. "You came from a world of storms and shadows," said the Valori Chancellor, "a place where life should not exist. And yet, you rose from it stronger than any of us. When we called for help, you answered. When we were ready to surrender, you showed us how to stand. For this, the galaxy will not forget the Deathworlders of Sol." The human captain only shook his head. "We are not saviors. We are survivors. But if you stand with us, then together we can survive anything." A new dawn. The Krylok swarm was not gone. More battles lay ahead, more sacrifices to be made. But the galaxy was no longer afraid, because now when the stars grew dark, civilizations knew they were not alone. They knew that somewhere out in the harsh light of Sol, there was a people who would rise to the call. The humans had proven that even from a death world, hope could be born. They had shown that strength was not only in numbers or weapons, but in spirit, the unyielding will to fight for life even when all seemed lost. And so, the legend spread across the stars. They had called for help, and it was not kings or conquerors who answered. It was humanity, the Deathworlders of Sol.